So right now we're just going to cover the base shape. So mainly the idea with this was just looking at reference images for this and just looking at generally how tires are shaped, different tires. For example, these are bike tires, totally different. These would probably be more close to what I'd be aiming for and just trying to get that general groove and general shape with comparable tires as well. And that's the idea. Like for modeling tires, you don't want a simple cylinder. You want almost like, how do I say it? It's almost bulging because it's full of air. And with how it's supposed to handle itself and supposed to handle the road, each tire has its own certain shape to it. And like for these slick tires, they have that same kind of bulge. And it's dependent on the rims that you choose. So you could either make your own, you can purchase them, and then you have to build your tire around that, and then build what type of tire you want, what type of tire you need for your animation. And you also want to make sure you have clean quad topology, make it easier for displacement as well. Very handy to have, and especially for tires themselves, I found that bump alone is not going to make the tire look totally good from all distances. Close ups will be a difficult thing, but with good tire topology as well, you get good reflections, you get good return on investment with making good topology. And yeah, so basic idea here and advice would be look at reference images of the tire you want to model and then basically go across that shape. Like here, for example, I started off when we went like back a few steps, I would have started off with a simple cylinder and then probably made it to size of the slick area of the tire. So we're starting off without the sidewalls. And then basically doing, looking at the reference tires I would have and looking at the general shape and trying to go for that. Like for example, here, what I'm trying to do is like copy the shape I've done before here, but also go for that kind of tire profile you want and create that. So then you have a very nice looking design that you can work off later and then refine later as well. And the sidewalls are the same process. You want to shrink it down and then you want to also make it blend properly as the tire does here. And mainly you want to look for good images of side profiles, front profiles, and then work off what shape you want for the tire. That's the best advice I can really give you. Possibly download tires from CGP as free ones and then just look at how they build things and then understand how they've done it and then work off that your own. And yeah, you'll eventually get the modeling aspect down. So, yep, that's the modeling aspect done. Now, on to the general texturing. Alrighty, hello everyone. We're going to be talking about the texturing part of the tire, which is basically the most essential part, all things considered. And so this will be split up into several little categories. So we've got the tire itself, we've got the sidewall and some extra little details, we've got the wheel imperfections, the displacement, and the roughness map. This is what you came for, so we're going to go a little bit in depth. It may take a little bit, but we'll see how we go. So first for the tire, we're just going to explain, well, the color's kind of obvious. You just kind of look at tires, figure out what color suits it, or if you want to, you go to your reference images and then you can use this little helper called a sample color. And, well, I cannot go back onto the thing. You'll have to have it open at the same time, so kind of like this. And then you can go, that's always lovely when they do things like that. So we have the sample color there. Now, you can see, you can select a color, like what color you want for the tire. And right now I won't do that currently. But yep, so that's the way you can grab the color. And then what I've basically done here is just added earthy brown tone to make it look like it's been used a little bit. and then just some general initial roughness. Like these are just using some basic masks. So this is basically just boosting the roughness up just a little bit. So just acting like the fill's just acting like almost a mask to this. So if you see here, yeah. In any case, this is kind of how I've done the materials initially, and then we also have a little bit of roughness. Like this is probably very, very subtle. If we look, yeah, not exactly the most obvious thing, which is fantastic to show. But this is kind of how I started things off. I started adding just very, very small things here and there, trying to really capture the small fine details, because of course I'm going for close-up shots. If you're going for close-ups, you want to have that fine detail. And then just some extra color variation, kind of just show maybe a little bit more, not really age, but just that the tire's seen stuff, that the tire's actually been manufactured and produced, because I'm sure there is just some general... Because when I was looking at the tires initially and basically thinking about it, I just saw that the tire itself, without being worn, seemed to have almost a different color in sections. So I thought I may as well grasp that with actually some variation colors in the actual material and give it a bit more subtlety. And then finally, this white drag layer is actually an accumulation, like all the stones, rocks, and all that the tire would have to go through and basically hit when it's being used. It will just generate like almost a soft layer of white, which will differentiate from the overall grey tone that the rest of the tire would have. So you can see like how there's a bit of almost a grey to it all now compared to the actual blackish tone that the rest of the tire used to have. And yeah, so, and especially here as well, this like is a really good example of what's happened. And basically that's what I tried to capture there. And then moving on to the sidewall, this is probably one of the more technical parts. Or well, it's mostly just I jumped into Photoshop, and you can make it a little bit easier for yourself. Make it a little bit easier yourself through. Here we go. You can actually look up tire sidewall textures, and you can pretty much find a load of them that you can actually use. And yeah, there you go. Pilot Sport free sidewall. There you go. It sorts yourself out, and you don't have to worry as much regarding tires. However, with me, I want to build my own stuff. I want to basically be able to make my own stuff and not be dependent on available tire sidewalls, as that can actually limit you significantly if you rely on just pre-made images too much. So there's two techniques that I've followed, which is basically just you can take one of these base images and then Photoshop extra details you want onto it, like I did with this one. Or there is the other option, which I'm exploring right now, is using reference images and collating them together to almost create the tire height texture, and possibly doing a 3D scan in general and actually grabbing the information that way. I will try, when I have the proper equipment, give that a go, and then show if it works well. Subtle details like this that I included, and that's coming from this tire, exactly. So you can see from its production, it's actually got like these almost slits. Well, not slits, but ribs going across the tire when it's been manufactured. And I thought, well, the tire's story, like, you've got to think about that as well. The tire's story, that it's been used for a little bit, but it's not fully knocked in, and it hasn't been used extensively. So I thought may as well add those pre-production ribs in there, and at least keep somewhat of them. Not more so in the middle, because they'll be definitely worn away by then, but on the sides they'll still exist somewhat, and that just gives a bit more storytelling and detail to the tire. And then here with the wheel imperfections, actually going back to this, it's covering this. The shapes and how to do it is just mainly through, you go through your brush tools. If I can remember where I put them. It's lovely when you haven't touched a file in a while, isn't it? So basically, hang on. Yep, so we go to our alphas, and you can actually look for a square alpha, extend it out, and create the square shape, and then place it on. And then all I've done here is used a transform node to actually move these all around, because you'll see semi-duplicates around to create the effect. And all I've done is I've just changed a little bit of the subtraction and all that to make it a bit unique in each and every way. And you get a good result out of that. Now moving back onto the wheel imperfections, the initial stuff. So this is to do with when we're going back to the worn slicks, right? So we have the tire running through on the track. It's going to be picking up a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is going to be picking at the rubber because, of course, the rubber will attach to the track. It will just naturally wear away. How do we represent that? And this is where my techniques come in. And basically, we go down to the very first one. Let's disable the other one so it just makes it a little bit clearer to see. So let's have a look. You probably can't tell from a distance, but I added a very small bump there. You can see it almost. Like we just jump into the normal. You can see it. No, that just makes it worse. Hang on. You can see it in the material. Just the small little bump. That was just to catch up on adding like the small bumps to like how pre-production tires would have, because rolling them around, handling them, material will naturally wear away, even with just small processes, which is kind of why you don't want to be too rough with stuff because you'll damage it. It's how it happens, and you just have to be careful. But going back to the tire, so we had this very small bump, and then we added big bump. So basically, these are like big impacts on the tire, like something's really nagged at it. It's just to add some variation to the other layers that are coming up. And now that we get into it, this is where the big layer is. This is kind of like how you would see the actual like worn look of the tires. So if we go here, it's a low res image, but you can see the bumpiness in it. Or you see this, you can see how it's poking out, because basically the rubber is getting ripped away from it and onto the track. And yeah, I tried to capture that the best I could. There's certainly better ways to do this, but if you're wanting to do it for cheap, I just used a dirt texture and then did some gradient linear to keep it centrally, because the tire's slick will only impact in the middle. It won't actually go onto the rims and the not on the rims, the sidewall, and further on the sides of the tire. It will stick to the center, and mostly just use some dirty concrete to actually make it a little bit less monogamous. And is monogamous? No, monogamous. Anyway, the word's not right. But to make it a little less just generated, trying to add some more natural look to it. And then we just go into like scratches. This is just adding more and more detail. Like you lob more detail onto it, more detail. That's how I do things. And like using dirty scratch, if you look at the mask here, very small, just adding like minute amount of detail. It may like come across to you as, why are you doing such small detail? Why are you not like making it all across the thing? Because we've already got a nice base. If you think about it, like with all the height and all the scratches that you have. But now all I'm doing is saying, okay, how can I play with that base and how can I make it look better, rather than overriding it? You want to use every part of the bump that you do to work together almost. And that's what I tried to aim for here. Like everything tries to blend well together to give a story, but also to give that natural look to the tire. And yep, so these are the scratches, and that's kind of the wheel imperfections. And now we can move on to the wheel displacement. This is the fun stuff. This is where a lot of the effort goes in with the tire. If I scroll through here, you'll see how many layers upon layers I have. It is massive. So now we're just going to like turn them all off. We can just have a preview of what we've currently got. And yep. Lots of them. And you can see for each layer, there's a lot of work that goes into it. Mostly, I could give you a step-by-step of what each layer does, but it's dependent on the tire you want to make. And the general advice I will give you is, if you want to, like, if we go through, let's go through this, for example, just currently. No, that's probably a bad idea. Let's choose this one. So, smaller stones, right? I want small pebbles. I don't want particularly big stuff. So, let's just come back here. So, we've got a very repetitive texture. I don't like that. No one does, because it's noticeable. If we go back to the material, that's noticeable. You can see it throughout the tire. You want to make stuff that looks natural. So, what am I going to do? So, I go through, grunge dust streak, try and make it a little less intense, maybe reduce the pattern a little bit. People won't be able to see it as much. And then I introduce another type of texture to take away, to eat away at it, to make it a little bit less obvious that there's actually a repeating texture there. And then I just add a paint. These paints are just manual stuff that I've done to the tire to remove like synchronous detail, to actually make it less repetitive, and then just more and more fiddling around, and then you arrive to a texture that doesn't actually look like it repeats too much, does it? It's more subtle than it initially was, and still it has all the detail that you need to get the job across. And then the linear is basically just to keep it here instead of going across. It's just a little bit of more, well, control over how the texture sits, because you want it to sit here. You don't want to sit it into the tire wall. And the basic idea follows for the rest of them. If we turn off all the other textures, you'll just start to see it's just layers upon layers of this kind of stuff. You want to achieve like a certain layer of stones and pebbles, then you do what you need to do to create the shape. You look at your reference images and you do that. And we start with another layer of dirt. This is just a very basic one, just to give a bit more color to it. And then we start getting into the biggest stones, like you can see here, just spreading them across, trying to make sure that there's really no noticeable patterns, because this is going to be the hardest thing with small textures, is that there will be tiling. And to work against tiling, you need to have different textures subtracting and removing or multiplying away from the main one to reduce that. And doing this is pretty effective, and I found it's worked for a lot of things that I've done. And yep, so it's the same idea here. Absolutely same idea. It's just repeating the same steps. Or like you can almost copy and paste the textures. That's what I've done, and I've just changed up a few parameters just to make it a little less noticeable, and just to make it a bit easier on myself to produce the rocks and stones that are on the tire. And then basically we go another layer of dirt, just a bit more color, just a bit more attitude, a bit more style to the tire, you know? Because I was looking at it and saying, maybe this is a bit too grey. Maybe this looks a little too factory type. It's up to you what you decide on, but you need to aim for what kind of environment your tire sits in. Like, hey, my roads are going to be different to your roads if you're in the United States. If you're in Europe, you'll have different conditions that you'll be following and different things you'll be experiencing. So, of course, you need to modify your tire to how your environment is, or the environment you want to make is. And yeah, you can see here just adding like little bits of more detail, like small dirt spots, like just more and more dirt. Same deal applies, just all the same stuff, copy paste, and all you're doing is just modifying until you get the right kind of shape you want. Scratches, yep. And then you continue that on, and you start seeing a picture of like, yes, this tire doesn't look like it has any repeating patterns. It looks like it's natural, because there's so many different layers intersecting with each other that it's barely noticeable. And the white bump here is actually to add a little bit more detail to the Bridgestone, the tire wall, to actually make it a little bit more detailed, and to kind of just make it seem like it's not just here that's getting used and abused. Also, the tire wall will see a little bit of it, because of course it will. And then finally, we're going to have the roughness maps. This is basically just adding a little bit more pizzazz. Like if you see with the roughness here, we do a before and after. Before, after. You can see there's a lot more rich detail there. Like it's seen like either water or rain, it's dried, it's seen a lot more like nature against it. Because when I took it out initially, I felt like it was too like rough. It didn't have enough rich detail. It wasn't showing all the detail it could. And this is kind of the remedy to it. If you see here, it's the same idea as with the rocks before, because all I'm doing is adding layers upon layers to make it look like that there is no pattern and to make a really good texture. And yeah. So, yes, that basically explains the tire texture and the tire detail in general. In any case, in the future, I'll be making a few more, and we'll see what changes, because I'm certain that I'll improve on the craft. But for now, I hope this helps you. This video will stay on Patreon for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'll release it officially to YouTube so that everyone can have a bit of a good experience learning, and also make it a little bit easier on yourselves when you're trying to get into automotive and make some really good stuff. Anyway, I'll catch you next time, and see ya.